What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with a box office breakdown for Sunday, September 28th, where the story of the weekend is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, which opened at $22 million in North America and an additional $26 million internationally. And now the debate is on over how do we wish to interpret these numbers, given the $130 million budget for the film, although some suspect that the budget's much higher, as well as the $70 million spent to market the movie. And I suspect that if this movie were yet another entry in a long-running science fiction franchise or superhero franchise, we'd all be eating it alive, calling for the head of the director, whoever made the movie. So is it hypocritical if we give the movie a pass, either because of our feelings for the movie or just out of loyalty to Paul Thomas Anderson, who's been thrilling us with this filmography since the 1990s? And along those lines, if you wanted to give the movie points for art or originality or taking a risk or being directed by a famous auteur director, I think a fair comparison would be to movies like Killers of the Flower Moon or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, all of which starred Leonardo DiCaprio and were directed by famous filmmakers. So Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon had a reported budget of $200 million and opened at $23.25 million, and Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had a reported budget roughly about $90 million and then opened to $41 million back in 2019. And obviously, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie to help push those numbers a little higher, but I think for Paul Thomas Anderson, obviously, this is a huge opening. This is the biggest opening of his career. The question is whether or not it'll be considered successful, because the budget is astronomical, and Paul Thomas Anderson, as much as he's beloved for movies like The Master or Punch Drunk Love or Magnolia or There Will Be Blood or Boogie Nights or any of his movies that you care to mention, he's never represented big box office. His biggest hit ever was There Will Be Blood, which capped out at $76 million internationally, not a big number. And the bigger question is whether or not Paul Thomas Anderson will ever get a chance to direct a movie at this scale ever again. And a lot of that will depend upon awards. I suspect this movie will at least get tons of nominations. And it also will depend upon the second weekend drop, because right now this movie's hanging on to all the premium screens, all the Dolby screens, all the IMAX screens. And so going into this next weekend, if we basically see the box office remain steady and kind of hold at this level, well, then that'll show that all the premium format junkies, and there are premium format junkies out there, that they're all going back for second and third helpings. But if the movie drops off a cliff, well, then it will have effectively ended one of the best hot streaks that Warner Brothers has ever enjoyed, because as of this last weekend, Warner Brothers was the first studio this year to cross the $4 billion mark, and admittedly, Disney will cross that mark as well once they release Zootopia as well as Avatar 3. But Warner Brothers has had an incredible year at the box office. No matter what you think of the movies, the last 7 movies they've released have all opened above $40 million, which is a very rare hot streak for a major studio. Obviously, this movie's going to end that hot streak. And when I say $40 million, I mean $40 million domestic. And there's an argument to be made that this movie's coming along at the perfect time in terms of Warner Brothers' overall release schedule, because after you've enjoyed an unprecedented run of box office success, people might be more inclined to forgive and forget if you have a movie which loses money but ends up getting a lot of awards and accolades. And if you look at the numbers for the movie in terms of reception, both critics and audience members are going gaga over the movie, although admittedly the audience for the movie is small. And I suspect that it'll remain small because the movie is very political and it explores a lot of divisive political issues, and usually divisive political issues don't translate to big box office. Usually big box office trickles down from big, dumb, obvious. If you look at like all the movies that have grossed $1 billion or more worldwide, they're not necessarily that demanding when it comes to the intelligence and the discretion and the taste of the viewer. And I seriously doubt that the powers that be at Warner Brothers, Mike DeLuca and Pamela Abdy, who run the movie division, were expecting big box office out of this movie when they gave it the green light. My question would be, what kind of box office were they expecting? Or were they basically assuming, oh, well, Minecraft's going to do so well, and Superman's going to do so well, and F1, which they distribute, is going to do so well, and all these other horror films are going to do so well, and Sinners is going to do so well, that we can kind of take the hit on the chin, because not so long ago, their jobs were on the line, where Warner Brothers was enjoying a cold streak after Joker Folie à Deux and Mickey 17 and the Alto Knights, and everybody assumed that they were going to be fired sooner rather than later. And then they started this 7-movie hot streak. And now they're everybody's favorite movie executives. And I've seen a lot of people arguing online that the box office for this movie is totally irrelevant and immaterial, that all that matters is the art of the movie, the politics of the movie, that just the fact that it exists, that in and of itself is a victory. And while I might admire or respect their passion, let's not be childish and let's not be naive. Do you want to see studios make more movies like this in the future? Would you like to have a movie landscape where Sony and Paramount and Universal and Disney and Warner Brothers all have one big prestigious movie every year, helmed by an auteur director where they're shooting the movie in IMAX, making the movie for $100 million? And there's a very short list of directors who could actually get those projects off the ground. And obviously, Christopher Nolan would be one of them. Ryan Coogler would be another one. Paul Thomas Anderson, obviously, since we're discussing his movie. I bet Quentin Tarantino, if he wished to, could make a $100 million IMAX movie. Maybe David Fincher, if he was making the movie for Netflix. But there's a very short list of directors that could actually get like a $100 million original movie made, shot in the IMAX format. But I would like to see every single studio make a movie like... Oh, Denis Villeneuve, he's another director who obviously could get a movie like that off the ground. But it would be really cool if we could look forward to like 5 or 6 original big budget movies shot in that premium format every year. But studios are not going to make those movies if movies like One Battle After Another completely, totally crash and burn and lose potentially $100 million. And so everything will depend upon what is the second we can hold for this movie. Is this a movie that's going to stick around in theaters for months and just keep playing to all the fans of VistaVision and IMAX and 70mm and all those premium formats? Or will it prove to be a movie with niche appeal to a small group of incredibly passionate fans who bang the drum for this movie until the end of time? You know, a movie like The Master. Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master was incredibly expensive and was made by Annapurna Pictures because Megan Ellison, who ran Annapurna, was the daughter of Larry Ellison, one of the wealthiest people on planet Earth, and his other child, David Ellison, is currently gobbling up every media company that he can get his hands on, including a Paramount and possibly Warner Brothers if he gets his way. But the Ellisons have very deep pockets. But a movie like The Master only gets made when you have the daughter of one of the wealthiest people on planet Earth agreeing to bankroll it. But my prediction right now is that in terms of box office, the movie's going to play out more or less the same way as Killers of the Flower Moon. It will not be the equal of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at the box office. That movie ended up grossing $392 million worldwide, and I almost feel like Quentin Tarantino is kind of intimidated by the popularity of that movie, and he's reluctant to make another one. I keep hoping that his ongoing rivalry with Paul Thomas Anderson, it's a friendly rivalry, but the rivalry is there. My hope is that One Battle After Another will do well enough, either in terms of box office or awards, where it kind of prompts and goads Quentin Tarantino to come out of semi-retirement to make another movie. And I know Tarantino's writing books and doing podcasts and all that stuff. I want him to make one more movie. He's way too young to have completely, totally retired. I think he's like in his early 60s. But I think he's terrified that he won't make a movie that's as popular as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But that remains to be seen. Who knows what the future might bring. But back to my original question. Are we being huge hypocrites if we judge One Battle After Another by different criteria than we would a movie set like in the Predator franchise or the Alien franchise or the Tron franchise or any franchise that you care to mention? Yes, we are. And I do give points for originality. I do give points for risk-taking. And I do give points to directors that I love and admire due to movies like Boogie Nights, which is one of my favorite movies of the 1990s. But the reality is, a filmmaker also has to be responsible. And anytime you give $130 million to any filmmaker, they have to feel some sort of obligation to make an entertaining experience. And there are moments in One Battle After Another that are thrilling and exciting. Like there's a chase scene in the latter part of the movie where you're like, whoa, that looks unlike anything that I've ever seen before. Where did they find this location and what technique did they use to put this unusual looking chase scene on the screen? So there are some thrills, but I honestly feel like Paul Thomas Anderson, no matter how talented he might be and no matter how much I might love some of his individual movies, I don't think he has a commercial bone in his body. When one of his movies does well, I think it's more by accident than by design. He follows his own passions, his own vision, his own storytelling impulses, and when it works out, he's like, great, maybe I'll get a chance to make another movie. But at this point, I think it's fair to say that One Battle After Another will be a money loser in the long term. But luckily, it's coming along at a time where Warner Brothers has enjoyed so much success, they can probably take that hit on the chin, provided that whatever their next movie is doesn't perform the same way as One Battle After Another. But that wasn't the only new movie out in theaters this weekend. There was another movie which opened at number 2, Gabby's Dollhouse. And I have no idea what this is. I'd never even heard of Gabby's Dollhouse until I looked up the box office breakdown over in Deadline. Apparently, I think there were like 20 seasons of this show, and now there's a movie, but it opened to $13.6 million. Once again, I don't know if that is above expectations, below expectations. We all have our blind spots, and Gabby's Dollhouse came along. I was like, That's a thing. I've never seen those words combined that way before, so y'all tell me. Was that a hit, a failure? I really have no idea. But two movies out there that are definitely underperforming are both Him as well as A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey. And Him, because of the low budget, will probably end up doing okay in the long term. But A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey is just completely, totally collapsing. But what is an undeniable success?
この長い戦いが今夜終わるかもしれない。
Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, Infinity Castle. Not only has it crossed 600 million worldwide, and perhaps even higher depending upon which publications you want to believe, but the reality is Infinity Castle is the most successful anime movie ever released in terms of total box office, and it's well deserved. I've been revisiting a lot of the old seasons since I saw Infinity Castle, and I've just been enthralled, and I've got a hot take related to Demon Slayer and its ongoing appeal. I think that the Demon Slayer franchise, which is 63 episodes of TV, as well as this new movie Infinity Castle and 2 more on the way, I think it represents to Japanese animation what Harry Potter represents to like tween fiction or young adult fiction in the West, because there are a lot of similarities, a lot of common ground. Young characters kind of slowly growing and training over time to eventually overcome a great evil. I honestly prefer Demon Slayer to Harry Potter by a very large margin. I'm not going to even kind of like talk around it. I fucking love Demon Slayer. It's absolutely fantastic. It's really entertaining. But here's the thing. Infinity Castle might be about to become even more successful because on October 8th, it's getting released in China. And it's difficult to predict how much of an audience there might be in China for Infinity Castle, but I suspect it could be potentially huge. So some people are predicting that perhaps this will be the first Japanese animated movie to cross 1 billion at the global box office. It's a long shot, but it's possible. If it takes off like a rocket in China, the way it has in some other countries, it could end up doing insanely well. And if an animated movie from Japan ends up grossing 1 billion worldwide, I think it'll be a total game changer for the global entertainment landscape, because there are a lot of people in Hollywood who just refuse to acknowledge that manga and anime even exist. They don't understand it. They don't watch it. And they're just like, oh, people who watch anime, they're a bunch of just weirdos living on the fringes of society, but they make no effort to understand it. And I've seen some other box office analysts, when they try to discuss the ongoing success of Demon Slayer, they clearly have no knowledge of the franchise, and they don't want to have any knowledge of the franchise. But the audience is speaking, the public is speaking. Even if it doesn't make another dollar, it's already the most successful anime in history. So stay tuned. In a few weeks' time, we might have reasons. If you're a fan of anime, you might have a reason to pop some champagne corks and celebrate the first $1 billion success in that category.
久しぶりだな、善逸。
And the last thing I want to mention before heading over to Variety is the New York Film Festival. I've been catching some flicks lately, and I got a few more on the calendar, but I saw After the Hunt on Friday morning, and director Luca Guadagnino and Julia Roberts and Andrew Garfield were all there in attendance. And I saw Anemone with Sean Bean and Daniel Day-Lewis, directed by the son of Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't know if I'm going to review either of these movies. I wasn't necessarily all that blown away by either of them. I feel like After the Hunt was trying to do something like Tar, starring Cate Blanchett, but didn't quite have the courage of its convictions and never really pressed down on the gas pedal, never really went for it. And I was like, why did we see this movie about this like controversial topic without it ever actually kind of diving into any controversies?
Everything about this feels like a cliche. She's exploiting this shallow cultural moment.
And Anemone, I feel like it's one of those movies that only gets made if your dad is Daniel Day-Lewis, where he was willing to come out of retirement to help his son get his career started and act in the movie.
What do you want from me, brother? What do you want?
Yeah, let's just say his son as a director who was there for the Q&A, he wasn't particularly impressive either as a filmmaker or as a speaker about his work, but I got to see Sean Bean and DDL on the same stage. I was like, all right, there's Hawkeye from Last of the Mohicans, a movie which I've seen a billion times. And there's Boromir from Fellowship of the Ring, another movie that I've seen a billion times. So just to see those two legends on the stage at the same time, where I could have reached out and touched the hem of their robes, that was a big thrill. And then tomorrow morning, I'll be seeing the new Bruce Springsteen movie with Jeremy Allen White called Deliver Me From Nowhere, which I suspect I will be reviewing. So stay tuned for that review later this week. But at this point, I think I've babbled enough. Let's get some real analysis from over at Variety with Rebecca Rubin's article titled Box Office, Leonardo DiCaprio's One Battle After Another kicks off with $22 million. Director Paul Thomas Anderson's comedic action thriller One Battle After Another topped box office charts in its debut, collecting $22.4 million from 3,634 North American theaters over the weekend. The film, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as an ex-revolutionary on the run, added another $26.1 million internationally for a global tally of $48.5 million. Box office experts are mixed on what to make of those initial results. A low $20 million debut is disappointing for a film that cost above $130 million to produce and another $70 million to market. And One Battle After Another certainly requires a huge turnout, roughly $300 million globally, to break even theatrically. That's because ticket sales are typically split 50-50 between studios and theater operators. But the R-rated film is original and nearly 3 hours long and doesn't enjoy the built-in audience that benefits franchise fare like Superman or Jurassic World Rebirth. Building excitement and getting people to buy a ticket can take time. Moreover, Warner Brothers keeps defying box office expectations, generating hits of all shapes and sizes, from kid-centric A Minecraft Movie and Superman to the not-so-family-friendly Sinners, Weapons, and The Conjuring Last Rites since April. This movie has a chance of getting to profitability if it lasts long enough in theaters and/or overperforms abroad, says David A. Gross, who runs the movie consulting firm Franchise Entertainment Research. It's going to get a lot of awards nominations, but that's 2 to 3 months away and unlikely to help this immediate release. Positive word of mouth is key to inspire the level of staying power that'll be needed to justify the studio's sky-high expenses. In that regard, One Battle After Another has been rapturously received by audiences, scoring an A grade on CinemaScore exit polls, and critics a 96% Rotten Tomatoes average, which should be a good sign for its theatrical run. Premium large formats like IMAX, Dolby, and VistaVision, which cost more than the average ticket, will also help bolster its earnings. Those larger-than-life screens contributed a massive 51% of the overall domestic tally, according to Warner Brothers. One Battle After Another will test DiCaprio's box office bankability, although Anderson, the director of Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and The Master, is considered one of the greatest filmmakers of his generation. His movies aren't usually commercial draws. For context, Anderson's highest-grossing film is 2007's There Will Be Blood, which earned $76.4 million globally. DiCaprio, an A-lister who has proven his theatrical bona fides with Titanic, Inception, and The Revenant, was most recently on screen in 2023's Killers of the Flower Moon. That film, directed by Martin Scorsese and co-starring Robert De Niro, opened at $23 million and ended its run with $68 million domestically and $158 million globally. Will One Battle After Another, which opened below Killers of the Flower Moon, ultimately prove to be the more commercial offering? Loosely inspired by Thomas Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland, DiCaprio stars in One Battle After Another as Bob Ferguson, a washed-up revolutionary who's living off the grid with his daughter Willa, newcomer Chase Infinity, until an enemy played by Sean Penn resurfaces and threatens to split up the family. Initial ticket buyers were predominantly male, 65%, and over the age of 25, 42%. And that last number is interesting because I can remember a time in the 1990s where only women wanted to see Leonardo DiCaprio movies and men avoided his movies like the plague. Like right around the time of Romeo and Juliet and Titanic, I just wanted him to die. I wanted someone to throw acid in his face. I was like, I fucking hate Leo. He's such a fucking pussy, blah, blah, blah. But then he started making movies like The Departed. I was like, oh, Leo's kind of cool. And now I'm a huge Leo fan. I think Leo's a total badass. But once upon a time, it was all the young girls out there who were like shrieking and screaming his name. And now it seems like as he's aging into kind of his kind of more beefy middle-aged period, the girls are losing interest, and it's the guys who are liking him. I was hanging out with my little sister who's 23 and her friends yesterday, and I mentioned the movie, and they were like, oh, Leo, he's gotten gross. I was like, wow. So the girls in their early 20s now think Leo has gotten gross. So it just shows how the mighty have fallen. But getting back to the article, One Battle After Another loomed over two fellow new releases, Universal's kid-friendly Gabby's Dollhouse the Movie and Lionsgate's R-rated slasher, The Strangers Chapter 2. Gabby's Dollhouse debuted in second place with $13.5 million from 3,500 North American theaters, squarely in line with projections. The G-rated film, based on the hit Netflix series aimed at preschoolers, earned a coveted A+ grade on CinemaScore exit polls, which could extend its theatrical life. Universal spent $32 million on production costs. The Strangers Chapter 2 landed at number 5 with a tepid $5.9 million from 2,650 theaters in its first weekend of release. That's far below the prior installment in the series 2024's The Strangers Chapter 1. The first slasher reboot launched to $12 million in 2024 and ultimately earned $48 million globally. Although the sequel is unlikely to near those box office heights, the film cost just $8.5 million to produce. That's a relief for Lionsgate because reviews and word of mouth likely won't help the film stick around on the big screen. The Strangers Chapter 2 was panned by audiences and critics who saddled the movie with a C- grade on CinemaScore and brutal 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. Rennie Harlan directed the follow-up, which brings back the masked maniacs at the center of the first installment. When they discover that one of their victims, Madeleine Pesch, is still alive, they return to finish the job. Reviews are poor. That's not a big deal for horror, says Gross, but the audience score is also weak, even for the genre. I mean, speaking of how the mighty have fallen, when I was talking about how Leonardo DiCaprio no longer appeals to girls in their early 20s, at one time, Rennie Harlan was one of the biggest directors in the business, making even though the movie was a commercial disappointment, making movies like Cutthroat Island, which was one of the most expensive movies ever made. But Rennie Harlan, he also directed, I believe, The Long Kiss Goodnight. Hang on, I'm just pulling up his IMDb. Yeah, so back in the 1990s, he was making movies like The Long Kiss Goodnight, Cutthroat Island, Cliffhanger with Sly Stallone, Die Hard 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I mean, he was a commercial filmmaker, and I can remember seeing pictures of him and Gina Davis, who he was dating at the time. They were making all these headlines as like a big celebrity couple and that sort of thing. And now he's directing The Strangers Chapter 2. But I just like the fact that he probably has more money than God at this point. I just like the fact that he still feels compelled to make these little low-budget genre films, even if they're not being so warmly received. But back to the article, Sony's anime smash Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, Infinity Castle, and The Conjuring Last Rites rounded out the top 5. Third place went to Demon Slayer with $7.1 million from 2,984 venues over the weekend. A major sleeper hit, the film has generated $118.1 million domestically after 3 weekends to stand as the biggest anime film ever in North America. It's been way bigger overseas with $487.3 million for a monster global tally of $605.4 million. Also, let's keep in mind the budget of Infinity Castle, $20 million. And obviously, when it comes to an ongoing franchise like Demon Slayer, you're kind of amortizing the costs over time, where you've got the manga, and then you got the show, and you got the movies. So once you've created certain designs and characters and that sort of thing, you don't have to build it from scratch all over again. But the reality is, this latest movie cost nothing to make. Here's my prediction or my suspicion. If you were to look at the profits of Infinity Castle and compare it to the profits of the 4 major superhero movies released in 2025, like if you took Superman, Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and Captain America: Brave New World, combined them all and combined all their losses and profits into one, I don't know what that number would be, but I suspect the profits, not the gross, but the profits of Infinity Castle would exceed the profits of 4 major Hollywood superhero movies combined. And that just shows you how audiences are looking for their entertainment elsewhere. But let's finish up the article. Conjuring landed at the number 4 spot with $6.9 million. The Paranormal sequel is also breaking records with $161.5 million domestically and $435 million globally, by far the biggest installment in the long-running franchise. Meanwhile, last weekend's new offerings, Universal's Him and Sony's A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, collapsed in their second outings. Ouch, she used the word collapsed. Him, a sports thriller produced by Jordan Peele, collected $3.8 million, a painful 71% decline from its debut. Ticket sales stand at $20.9 million domestically and $21 million globally. A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, a romantic drama starring Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, tumbled all the way to 10th place with $1.2 million, plunging 63% from last weekend. So far, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey has earned $5.8 million in North America and $8 million overseas against a $45 million budget. At any rate, let's look and see what's coming up this week. I'll be seeing Deliver Me From Nowhere tomorrow morning at the New York Film Festival. Wednesday night, I'm seeing Good Boy, the new horror film with a dog as the central protagonist, which I think is a pretty cool gimmick for a movie. Hopefully, it'll deliver. Then we have Smashing Machine and Anemone opening this weekend. I've already posted my review for Smashing Machine, which I liked quite a bit. I said it's the best movie about MMA, although it's really just a drama that happens to have MMA as part of like the backdrop. But I hope Smashing Machine will do well. I would love to see The Rock get into more character-driven work instead of just making Jungle Cruise movies and that sort of thing. And as far as Anemone is concerned, I kind of hated the movie, even though I love Daniel Day-Lewis and worship him like a god. That movie there's not enough movie there. There are a couple of great shots that you can kind of string together and turn into a trailer, but the movie really has no reason to exist and nothing to say. And so, but if you just want to see Daniel Day-Lewis on the screen one more time, by all means, go check out Anemone. Is there anything else coming out? Oh, Shelby Oaks. I haven't been able to buy a ticket yet, but in theory, Shelby Oaks, which is coming out later this week. And that's a horror movie directed by Chris Stuckman, one of the most popular YouTubers when it comes to film commentary. I think he's got like 2 million subscribers. I mean, he's been insanely successful doing movie reviews. And the question now is, can you make the jump from a reviewer or a critic into being a filmmaker? And if he does successfully make the jump, will he retire from film commentary? But I would like to see more YouTubers making the jump to actually making movies. It reminds me a little bit, not the I don't know if the movie's any good or not, but in the 1950s, you had a lot of French film critics at Cahiers du Cinema who eventually decided, well, fuck all this writing bullshit, let's make some movies, which launched, the French New Wave and Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut and all those legends. And I feel like there's a historical precedent of critics making the jump to filmmaker. I don't know if Chris Stuckman wants to be a filmmaker from here on out or not, but I will see Shelby Oaks just out of curiosity. Like, does he have the chops? Does he have the same chops as a filmmaker that he did in terms of building up a big following online? Who can say? But I think that's all I've got to say for this week. Hope you enjoyed the breakdown. If so, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.